was one of those nights where the silence in my apartment had started to feel like a physical presence, something heavy and suffocating pressing down on the walls that I'd been staring at the same line of code on my laptop for 2 hours, the blinking cursor a tiny, mocking metronome counting down the seconds of my uselessness. My eyes were dry, my back ached, and the only thing in my fridge was a jar of pickles and a bottle of hot sauce that had probably been there since the previous tenant. That's when the idea of the 24-hour Kroger on Rosedale Highway popped into my head. That IT wasn't just about groceries. It was about movement, about fluorescent lights and the mundane, reassuring logic of commerce. That a place to reset. That I almost called my friend Tyler, but he'd have wanted to turn it into a beer run, and I wasn't in the mood for his loud, boisterous energy. Then I thought of Maya. We'd been friends since a graphic design class at Bakersfield College, the kind of friends who orbited each other with a constant, low-level charge of something unacknowledged. That I'd had a crush on her for years, a quiet, persistent thing I'd learned to ignore most of the time. But tonight, the loneliness was sharp, and the thought of her company was a specific, warm antidote. She picked up on the third ring, her voice husky with sleep. "Liam? Everything okay?" "Can't sleep," I said, the phone slick against my ear. "Thinking of making a Kroger run? You want to get some air?" There was a pause, the soft rustle of sheets. That I pictured her in bed, the dark tumble of her hair against a white pillowcase. "Kroger? Seriously? It's like 1 in the morning. It's the most exciting thing happening in Bakersfield right now. Come on. I'll buy you those weird yogurt-covered pretzels you like." She laughed, a low, tired sound. "You're a weirdo. Fine. Give me 10 minutes to look human." When I pulled up outside her neat little bungalow on Q Street, she was waiting on the porch, bathed in the yellow glow of the bug light. The sight of her hit me with a familiar, pleasant jolt. She was wearing faded jeans that hugged the gentle curve of her hips and a thin gray V-neck sweater. No makeup, which made her cheekbones seem even more pronounced, her brown eyes larger and softer. As she slid into the passenger seat, she brought with her the scent of sleep and a faint, clean fragrance of lavender soap. "You look fine," I said, immediately feeling like an idiot. She shot me a wry smile, buckling her seatbelt. The movement pulled the sweater taut across her chest, and I had to force my eyes back to the road. "You look like you haven't slept in a week. Code monster eating your brain. Again?" Something like that. The drive was short, the streets of Bakersfield empty and surreal under the orange haze of the sodium vapor lights. The Kroger sign was a beacon of stark white and blue in the vast, dark parking lot. We were one of only 4 cars, clustered near the entrance like scared animals. The air outside was still and warm, carrying the distant smell of asphalt and the faint, sweet rot from the dumpsters around back. Inside, the store was a cathedral of unnerving quiet. The muzak was playing some instrumental version of a pop song I almost recognized, the notes echoing in the vast, empty space. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile, shadowless glare on the endless aisles. That a lone cashier, a kid with a wispy mustache and a blue vest, was slumped on a stool by register 6, staring at his phone. He didn't look up as we walked in. Maya grabbed a cart, its wheels wobbling with a rhythmic, metallic clatter that was the loudest sound in the building. "Okay," she whispered, her voice absorbed by the canned goods. "This is officially creepier than your apartment." "It's peaceful," I insisted, but I felt it too. The emptiness was a different kind of pressure that IT felt watched. We started in the produce section. The fruits and vegetables were arranged in impossibly perfect, brightly colored pyramids. Everything was a little too still, a little too pristine. I picked up a plastic clamshell of strawberries, the red almost violently vivid under the lights. "I don't even know what I need," I mumbled, dropping the strawberries into the cart. "I just needed to get out." Maya leaned against the handle of the cart, her body angled towards me, the V-neck of her sweater gaped slightly, and I caught a glimpse of the smooth, pale skin of her collarbone and the gentle swell of her breast. I felt a quick, hot twist of desire, immediately followed by a wave of guilt. This was Maya. My friend, and we were in a fucking Kroger at 1 in the morning. IT felt seedy and wrong, which only made the feeling more intense. "We could just get junk food and watch a movie at your place," she suggested, her eyes scanning my face. "Might be less depressing than this." "Deal," I said, my voice a little too eager. We moved on, our footsteps echoing that I was only half paying attention to what I was grabbing. A bag of chips, a box of frozen pizza, a six-pack of IPA. My focus was split between the unsettling quiet of the store and the presence of Maya beside me, that I was hyper-aware of the space between us, the way her hip occasionally brushed against the cart, the sound of her breathing. Under the flat, bright lights, every detail of her seemed amplified. The tiny freckle just below her left ear, the way her lower lip was slightly fuller than the upper, the delicate shape of her ankles above her scuffed Converse sneakers. That it was in the cereal aisle that I first noticed him, that he was standing at the far end, near the oatmeal, perfectly still. A tall, gaunt man in a long dark coat that seemed entirely wrong for the Bakersfield heat, even at night. His hair was a lank, gray-streaked brown, falling over his forehead. That he wasn't looking at the shelves, that he was looking directly at us. I nudged Maya. "Don't look now, but we've got company." She glanced over, then quickly looked away, a faint line appearing between her eyebrows. "Weird that he's just standing there." We turned down the next aisle, pet supplies. That I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the late hour and the general strangeness of the situation. Maybe he was just a night owl, a fellow insomniac. But when I reached for a bag of dog food I didn't need, I don't even have a dog, I saw him again. He was at the other end of the aisle, his back to us now, but his posture was so rigid, so unnaturally still, that it was just as unsettling. "Okay, he's following us," Maya whispered, her voice tight. Her hand found my arm, her fingers cool against my skin. The contact sent a jolt through me, a confusing mix of protectiveness and that same inappropriate arousal. Her fear was palpable, a sharp scent in the air, and it made my own pulse quicken. "Maybe he's just shopping," I said, but it sounded weak even to me. No one shops like that. We picked up our pace, making a beeline for the dairy section. The cart's wobbly wheel now sounded like a frantic alarm. I grabbed a gallon of milk and a block of cheddar cheese, tossing them into the cart without looking. I just wanted to finish and get out. When I turned around, the man was there, standing by the yogurt. He was closer this time, close enough that I could see the deep lines etched around his mouth and the strange, watery pale blue of his eyes. They didn't seem to focus on anything, yet I felt utterly seen. He took a step forward. He didn't smell like anything. Not sweat, not soap, not the store. Just nothing. "Your cart is almost full," he said. His voice was dry and raspy, like pages turning in an old book. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Maya's grip on my arm tightened. I could feel the fine bones in her wrist. "Yeah, just about done," I managed, my own voice sounding strange and high. He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting from me to Maya. It felt intrusive, a physical violation. He stared at her for a beat too long, his eyes tracing the line of her throat, the shape of her body in the thin sweater. A hot spike of anger cut through my fear. I took a step forward, putting myself slightly between him and Maya. "Can we help you with something?" I asked, trying to sound firm. The man's lips stretched into a thin, humorless smile. "It's not about what you can do for me." He turned and walked away, his footsteps making no sound on the linoleum floor. He just seemed to dissolve into the shadows at the end of the aisle. We stood there for a full minute, not speaking. The hum of the coolers was deafening. "What the hell was that?" Maya finally breathed, releasing my arm. Her face was pale. "I have no idea. Let's just pay and go." We pushed the cart towards the front of the store. The encounter had left me shaken, the mundane task of grocery shopping now feeling like a fraught, dangerous mission. My earlier lust had been completely replaced by a cold, creeping dread. As we walked, I glanced down into the cart, just to make sure we had everything. And that's when the first wrong thing registered. Sitting on top of the bag of chips and the box of frozen pizza was a small rectangular box. A pregnancy test. I stopped dead. "Maya? Did you put this in here?" She looked into the cart, her brow furrowed in confusion, then her eyes widened. "What? No, of course not. Why would I?" We both stared at the box. It was a generic store brand .2 tests. The packaging was stark and clinical. "Maybe it was already in the cart," I suggested, though I knew it wasn't. The cart had been empty when we got it. We'd been the only ones in the entrance. "Maybe," Maya said, but she didn't sound convinced. She reached out and picked it up, turning it over in her hands as if it might offer an explanation. Her fingers were trembling slightly, The sight of her holding that object in this context sent another unwelcome, jarring thought through my mind. A vivid, unbidden image of her in a different circumstance, waiting for a result that I shoved it away, disgusted with myself. Just leave it on a shelf, I said. Weird prank or something? She nodded quickly and placed the box on a display of air fresheners that we continued to the checkout, the mood now thoroughly shattered. The young cashier finally looked up as we started unloading the cart onto the conveyor belt that he moved with a sluggish, bored efficiency, beeping each item with a hollow thunk. Then he picked up the dog food. This too? He asked, his voice monotoned as I stared at the bag. Purina 1 for large breeds that I had a clear memory of my hand reaching for it, a thoughtless, automatic motion in the pet aisle. But why? The memory felt false, like something I'd been told rather than something I'd done. Yeah, I said, my mouth dry. Must have grabbed it by mistake. He beeped it. Then he picked up the strawberries, then the milk, then the cheese, all normal. Then he paused, holding a small, dark blue bottle I'd never seen before. It was nail polish remover. Acetone. Maya and I exchanged a look. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. That's not ours, I said. The cashier shrugged. It was in the cart. He beeped it. Next was a cheap, disposable lighter. Then a single, thick white candle. Then a small, framed print of a generic landscape, a barn in a field at sunset. Each item was a fresh shock that we watched, silent and horrified, as a collection of things we had no memory of selecting piled up on the belt. A bottle of cheap whiskey. A pack of men's briefs, size medium. A first aid kit. A child sippy cup, bright yellow with cartoon ducks. Stop, I said, my voice cracking. These aren't ours. The cashier looked at me, his eyes dull and uninterested. It's all in your cart, man. You want to put it back, you gotta take it back yourself. It was a store policy I knew well, but in that moment, it felt like a malicious, bureaucratic trap. The idea of going back into those brightly lit, empty aisles to return these bizarre items was unthinkable. The man could be anywhere. Just scan it, I muttered, pulling out my wallet that I just wanted to leave. The final total was absurdly high. I swiped my card mechanically, the beep of the machine sounding like a verdict. As the cashier bagged the groceries, I saw him pause at the last item. It was a small, white cardboard box, the kind that holds a single greeting card. He didn't open it, just slipped it into a plastic bag with the candle and the lighter. We didn't speak as we wheeled the cart out into the parking lot. The night air felt no cooler, no fresher. It was heavy and stale. We loaded the bags into the trunk of my car in a frantic, silent rush, the plastic handles digging into my palms. I slammed the trunk shut, the sound unnaturally loud in the vast quiet. Liam, Maya said, her voice small. She was hugging herself, staring back at the Kroger entrance, the cart. I looked. We'd left the empty cart in the middle of the parking lot. But it wasn't empty. Sitting upright in the child seat was the pregnancy test. We got in the car and I locked the doors. The click of the locks was a feeble, meaningless gesture. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, my hands gripping the wheel too tight. What was that? Maya asked again, but this time it was a plea. The nail polish remover? The candle? The whiskey. My dad, she trailed off, shaking her head. Your dad what? Nothing. It's stupid. She stared out the window at the passing strip malls. When I was a kid, my dad was an alcoholic. A bad one. That brand, that was the cheap shit he'd drink. And the nail polish remover. One time my mom tried to get the smell of whiskey out of his favorite armchair with acetone. It ruined the fabric. Left a huge stain. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. And the candle? She was silent for a long moment. The night he left for good, the power went out in a storm. We sat in the living room with a single candle, just like that one. He told me he was going to get milk. He never came back. I couldn't think of anything to say. The coincidence was too specific, too vicious. I thought about the items in my trunk. The dog food. I'd had a dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, when I was 12. He'd gotten out of the yard and was hit by a car. I was supposed to be watching him. The briefs, size medium. My size. The landscape print. It looked exactly like the painting that had hung in my grandparents' farmhouse, the place I'd loved most in the world as a kid, which they'd sold after my grandfather's death to pay for my grandmother's medical bills. A secret regret I'd never shared with anyone, a feeling that I should have done anything to help them keep it. The groceries in the trunk weren't random. They were targeted, they were echoes of our regrets, our shames, our private pains. When we got back to my apartment, we brought the bags inside but left them by the door, a guilty, silent agreement not to unpack them. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken fear that we ended up on my couch, not watching the movie we'd put on, just sitting in the dim light of the television. Maya had pulled her knees up to her chest, her arms wrapped around her legs. The position accentuated the curve of her thigh, the delicate shape of her bare foot. Normally the sight would have captivated me, but now it was just another detail in a world that had gone terribly wrong. The attraction was still there, a dull, persistent thrum, but it was tangled up with everything else, making me feel dirty and complicit. "Do you think he put that stuff in our cart?" she asked, not looking at me. "I don't see how he could have doubt we were there the whole time." "Then how?" I had no answer. That we sat in silence for a long time, until Maya's breathing evened out and her head slumped against the back of the couch. That she'd fallen asleep, that I should have woken her up, driven her home. But I couldn't bring myself to move. That I just watched her sleep, the rise and fall of her chest, the peaceful slackness of her face. She looked vulnerable, and the desire to protect her ward with a darker, more selfish impulse. The horror of the night had stripped away social niceties, leaving something raw and primal. That I imagined what it would be like to touch her shoulder, to feel the warmth of her skin through the soft wool of her sweater. The thought was immediately followed by the image of the gaunt man's eyes on her, and a fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. I must have dozed off too, because the next thing I knew, a sound jerked me awake. That it was a soft, scraping noise from outside my apartment door. That I sat up, my heart hammering. The TV was still on, casting flickering blue shadows around the room. Maya was still asleep.